Great.
Morning.
Morning, Ian.
First pod of December.
Yeah,
You got
yeah.
your fluffy sweater on.
It's not that cold out, I think. Yeah, -3. It's much colder earlier in the week, but I think a bit of a Chinook is blowing through. So
The kids
maybe
are
not.
hunting for the elf on the shelf.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
What did the elf do last night?
She moved into a bookshelf to kind of keep an eye on them on the way out to school to make sure they're not causing too much of a ruckus.
My wife and I are talking about that because she's doing any day. Be six. Well, it's supposed to be 6 days, but it'd be any day here.
I
So
mean, you're deeply on the clock. I think her second one was 10 or 12 days early, so you're well in the window.
yeah, it sounds like the sounds of it. It's not going to be early, but we'll see. We'll see.
You never know. Everyone was like, "Yeah, we're good," and we're not.
Yeah, I know. Like, it could happen today.
Yeah.
It could happen right now. I don't know. You see
Well,
me disappear.
yeah. Well, hopefully the next 15 minutes you can get to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so
So
we're gonna talk what nuclear today.
nuclear. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to talk about, and maybe something we should have talked about a while ago. And we both did a bit of research on it. I had laser eye surgery, and so I was recovering for like 3 days without being able to see. And I listened to this book by Tim Gregory called "Go Nuclear," and then I watched a movie last night called Nuclear Now, which is really good. I recommend anybody. I'll post both of these links in the chats, but um, both really good, and from a both historical nuclear perspective, but also like future new technologies, other applications of nuclear, um, very broadly sweeping.
Yeah. I mean, it got my attention for a couple reasons. I think you've seen this cascade of headlines, largely driven by the big tech companies and largely in parallel with the AI boom around nuclear and investments in SMRs, so small modular reactors, but also taking on PPAs for, say, restarting 3 Mile Island, the Dwayne Arnold plant, et cetera. And so I see that. And then the other thing that caught me was there was a World Nuclear Industry Status Report that came out earlier this fall, and they were pretty, I would say, negative on nuclear's future, which was surprising for an industry body report. And so just trying to
Yeah,
match all the rhetoric of excitement, which is clearly in a renaissance I think we've seen in North America, tech leaning in, at least with existing nuclear and sort of bench and sort of early stage tech, and then this sort of industry body that's like, I don't know. So
what
that paradox definitely has caught me over the fall here.
what were some of the points of that industry study that were sort of not so optimistic?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things. One is the load following capability, and if you take the presumption that renewables and particularly solar come into the market aggressively and continue to, then you're talking about within a daily or 24-hour scale having to ramp up and ramp down. So there's some questioning about the ability to load follow there. I think there's competition from products like battery storage that really do meet that need exceptionally well on the short time scale. And so how does that fit? And then there's the third question of really how do you pay for and I think really reward these longer duration baseload assets? And that's been something that's been plaguing markets in general. Just like we obviously need seasonal variation
Yeah.
assets and how do you reward them?
I mean, I think it's a good point about just the build out of wind and solar batteries. Like, there becomes only a very limited window of dispatch for a nuclear facility if it is baseload, right? Like,
well, day to day, but you can seasonally, right? Like you get the big, what's the German term?
yeah,
Cloud, where you get a couple weeks
yeah,
of dead wind or this winter to summer peaks and fall walls. Like there's a lot of variation on sort of a calendar year scale, but I mean, we've looked at long duration storage. It's very hard to make economics work when you're trying to do 1 or 2 dispatch cycles in a year. And that really does extrapolate into these big thermals that are seeing their primary role of dispatchable power getting eaten into by batteries and solar. And so like, how do you really reward and incentivize those assets to be built into the system?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think,
I
sorry,
mean,
I think that's like maybe the crux of the conversation is there's the value to nuclear as it exists today, and then is there the incentives to really generate a massive new build out of new capacity? And those two things maybe are a little bit different in their argumentation.
yeah. 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 I mean, they're like from a, say, load following perspective, there are some interesting technologies out there that could play into that, like Bill Gates' Natrium
Yeah.
reactor, this sort of salt reactor. But that's, not going to be ready till 2030.
And I think it's a little bit overplayed too, because I think there's a way to manage the composite of assets in a way where these things are all complementary. And there is certainly capacity to ramp up and ramp down nuclear, but also recognizing the broader, again, calendar needs.
Yeah.
More things
So,
to figure out market wise.
yeah. I mean, you posted an interesting chart on your account, LinkedIn account, the other day, really on the cost of nuclear, which I thought was really interesting. It's something that we were talking about just before this, in terms of escalation in cost in the United States and France versus China, and the the factors behind that. Essentially, I mean, I'm of the opinion that um, regulatory delays are a huge component of that. There's another chart that I found that looks
Yeah.
at construction duration, sort of completed before 3 Mile Island and during 3 Mile Island, and just like the change in construction time in construction timeline, sort of pre and post, it's like dramatically different.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was really interesting too. And I think we've both seen charts like that repeatedly show up. The thing that I wonder looking at is like, is it just the regular thing? Like, let's say we fix the regulatory thing, hard to do, but let's say you do it. Like, do you suddenly end up on a learning curve which dictates declining costs through time? Because I think even full stop, like costs have to come down, and most of the competing technologies, geothermal, CCUS plus, or sorry, gas plus CCUS, even synthetically cleaned up stuff with CDRs and the rest, like all those things have like projected cost curves coming down. So you have to believe, I think, in nuclear costs coming down through time. And so regulatory is one, but is that sufficient on its own? And what else is maybe going on there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think you can break that into a couple components too. Like one is the regulatory piece, but I also encountered the interesting idea of the forgetting curve, right? We talk about learning curves. As you get more iteration, you learn. The forgetting curve is like, if you don't iterate fast enough, there's sort of this embedded atrophy that takes place, industrial base, human capital, et cetera. And so you still have, even if you took the regulatory away, maybe you actually have to go a certain pace just to keep things flat.
Yeah. Yeah, that with the sort of Chinese curve is kind of flat over the last, 5, even 20 years.
Yeah, and there's arguments that just technological complexity, and even at the pace that they're deploying, it's insufficient today to drive a really steeply downward slope in the cost of the technology. And it makes you wonder, like if you're competing against, say, a solar panel, which is a very small atom of increment of capacity, so the iterations are very high for a gigawatt scale, versus a single reactor unit for 1,000. Like, you just not have small atomized units to be able to go and drive cost out of it, and that would be obviously an argument for SMRs. There's other
maybe microreactors.
Microreactors, yeah. It's just sort of like an interesting comparison. Like, and so you get this energy, pun maybe intended, behind the movement, but then even if you can execute on it, like what can you really expect on a human timescale?
Yeah. I mean, when it takes 10, 15 years to build a nuclear facility, that's half of somebody's career potentially.
Yeah, and maybe we do 20 a year, or 20 over that time frame. Like you did 1 or 2 a year. That would be a useful increment, but it's still only 40 units over a 20-year horizon.
Yeah, it's not many.
And the other question that comes out of that too, and coming back to the whole tech piece, is I think there's a ton of excitement for existing facilities and co-location. Totally makes sense. Great product for gigawatt scale data centers. SMRs are nice. But if the real boom for power demand is, and so the awkward boom is maybe the next 5 years where the grid's trying to adapt to it, like what is a deployable technology in that time frame? And I'm now going to bring up geothermal on your behalf, I think, but like what Fervo and others are doing, like there's real projects. You have 100 megawatts coming on, I think, next year. That's potentially scaling to 300 or 400 megawatts in the next couple of years. Like this is all like material scale that's deployable in that 5-year window. I don't think there's very few, if any, nuclear projects of any scale that you'd be able to deploy in the 5-year window.
Yeah, I feel like it is more of a long-term solution, and do we see demand continuing to grow at such an accelerated rate that it's warranted? I think there's another component of nuclear that I really get the sense of from reading that book, listening to that book, and watching that documentary, which is around nuclear fear, which is really what's hindered nuclear development over the last, what would that be, 50 years almost. I mean, Fukushima was the last example that sort of really killed it. But it's like, if there were to be any disaster, I'm not saying there will be, but there's going to be something, and I think that would be an immediate setback once again for the global deployment of nuclear. And it's like these disasters, they don't have to be big. Like, 3 Mile Island was not big. It was not a big disaster in the grand scheme of things. Like Fukushima was not a big disaster. Like, it's crazy that reactor, like Fukushima, the failure of that kind of almost overshadowed the tsunami in Japan. I mean, it was part of that, but like there were no deaths from either 3 Mile Island or Fukushima. I mean, Chernobyl was maybe a little bit bigger, but it's like very small in the grand scheme of industrial disasters. And it's like those are just so publicized in such a negative way by groups against nuclear. And I think the public's fear of just radiation itself and the lack of knowledge in terms of what it actually does and what levels are actually harmful, that it's like any failure is going to set back the industry, right? And that's one component that makes me actually makes me believe that nuclear will not work, because we will see failures and they will be blown way out of proportion.
Well, even without failures, there's probably a quote unquote regulatory ratchet through there, and a failure would certainly accelerate and amplify that. I think that, again, going back to this whole velocity concept, where if you built one every 5 years, just for example, there's 5 years of regulatory ratchet in between. And so even if the technology is the same and like the exact same facility, there is still a first of a kind component in terms of the regulatory navigation of what's happened in the landscape. And so I think just like as we think about these technologies and iterations and velocity, there's just so much merit to things that you can atomize smaller and see much, much higher repetition in order to drive cost out, drive learning curves, and allow that to dominate the regulatory and the forgetting curve attributes of these systems. And like every system has them. It's just which ones are the dominant forces as you lay them out.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It's been fun to unpack, because as a technology, I mean, there's so many things that make sense from first principles. If you were to draw this up from a blank sheet of paper, anyone who plays SimCity knows that, right? But
I mean, it makes so much sense. Yeah, I mean, like if you look at it historically, like we were on pace to like have a nuclear future, before the 70s, the 80s, like nuclear build out was incredible, like globally. And if that pace had continued, we'd probably be operating at like 80%, 90% nuclear if it had continued in that path, like right now. And, the solar and wind build out wouldn't have happened. It would probably be a much cleaner society. Like I think all the merits are there for nuclear. I think we're just kind of maybe too far gone now with build out of other types of renewable energy.
I mean, the one thread that I have not looked at and need to dig into is what's the siting capacity? And my understanding is that almost everything for the Chinese fleet is along coastal areas.
Yeah,
This
need
is
water.
I know the French fleet is very susceptible to snowpack and water availability, and so many times of the year, if you have a drought or something like that, that fleet can't operate as intended. And so, we haven't even gotten into that. Like, we're talking about the velocity and ability to build at any sort of pace that is useful. The second question is like, what is the remaining inventory of sites? And I'm sure like globally there's lots, but the sort of water cooling concern, especially at the utility scale or gigawatt scale, seems to be an important threat. Again, not one I've done in much detail.
I haven't either, but I'd be curious to see what that water availability criteria is relative to, say, a natural gas-fired power plant or coal, right, of a similar size.
Yeah. No idea. Good idea. Good question.
Because I would think there's, a huge number of locations you could cite these. And I mean, if you can use seawater, I mean, obviously there are risks of tsunamis, right?
You want coastal, but non-earthquake zone. So,
yeah. But I mean, like, you just got to build the right infrastructure to protect those facilities that warrant, one in a 20,000 year, one in a 50,000 year event, right? Like, prepare for the worst.
Yeah, I guess in fairness, I mean, there's nuclear facilities in California and elsewhere, so it's not. Japan's got plenty. Fukushima aside, like, it does add to the engineering problem, though. Anyway, I love the conversation. I think it's like a super fascinating piece of, you've got the tech theme coming through. You've got sort of divergent paths from a regional basis. Like, is this an intrinsic or regional problem? What's actually actionable in terms of like the regulatory ratchet versus the technological learning curves, and then just all the progressions to it. And it's a great case study for some of the technologies that we have to look at as we're trying to predict the future.
Totally. I mean, it's good to see. It's good to see the support from the federal government. A lot of money flowing into space, startups. So I think there will be a bright future for nuclear, and I would hope there is. I mean, I think it's a great technology. It's almost on par with geothermal, I'd say, in terms of a low carbon baseload solution.
In terms of like space in your heart, it's almost
No, definitely not. But I can't let my heart dictate.
Fair enough.
I can for certain things, but
well, maybe we'll leave it there. Appreciate everybody stepping in and listening to us rant today. Always a fascinating topic. Love comments and any perspectives.
Yeah, I'll post some of those the links to some of the sources that I've been looking at the last couple of days. And again, everybody, thanks for listening, and comments are appreciated. Love to hear what you'd love to talk about. Comment section's been pretty empty, but we know y'all are watching because getting a lot of good feedback. So thanks for that.
Perfect. Well, speak soon.
Yeah. See ya.